Today I'd like to tell you the story of the time I met Trevor Noah, because it was a bit of a disaster. This meeting takes place in the spring of 2019, but I'd wanted to meet Mr. Noah for far longer. For the longest time, the most common question I got as a kid was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And for like 10 years, my answer was, I don't know. Then, for a little bit, I wanted to be a Mythbuster, specifically this one. Then, a couple years later, I wanted to be Jon Stewart. Then, after he retired, I wanted to be Trevor Noah. I wanted to be Trevor Noah so much that in senior year of high school, when we got to do a book report on a book of our choosing, I chose his autobiography. Flash forward to 2019, and for my birthday, I was gifted tickets to see Hamilton. It was amazing. But while we were in New York, we figured it would be cool to visit a taping of The Daily Show in person. Tickets were free, but you had to book them out like months in advance. And obviously we got them. Here's a picture of me and my mom on the set. Before we got there, I looked up what it was like on set. And if you haven't seen The Daily Show, it's basically taped in this order. And in between each of these segments, there's a chance for an audience member to ask Trevor a question. And if his response is good enough, it's uploaded to The Daily Show's YouTube channel as between the scenes content. So before I even got to the show, I knew I wanted to ask Trevor one of those questions. And I wanted it to be a question that he'd never heard before. I didn't want to just ask him about current events. I wanted to know more about him. And I had an advantage. I'd read his book. As some context, you should probably know that Trevor grew up in an extremely poor area as an illegal mixed child in apartheid South Africa. Let me read you a passage. It's about his time as a teenage bootlegger with a home CD burner that he owned. I never judged anyone's taste in music.
You wanted the new Nirvana? I got you the new Nirvana. You wanted the new DMX? I got you the new DMX. I now controlled production, sales, distribution. I had everything I needed to lock down the bootleg business.
Now, that was extremely interesting to me. After his rise to stardom, there was a high probability that Trevor might interact with DMX in person. DMX, whose whole catalog is about how much he's gonna beat you up. And Trevor had put in writing that he bootlegged his shit for a quick buck. Logic was even the guest that night, and it reminded me of a quote from one of his songs.
Goddamn, conversations with legends. Crazy how one day your idols can turn into your brethren.
So going off this information, I wanted to know what it was like for Trevor to interact with artists whose music he had stolen, and I was super excited to ask him about it. So remember how I told you about the structure of the show? There's like 150 people in the audience, and 2 opportunities for questions. And the entire time this monologue was filming, I was thinking to myself about how excited I was to ask my question. As soon as Trevor finished his monologue and opened the floor to questions, boom, my hand was up, like on cooldown, like the smartest kid in the class, and I was the only person with a hand raised. So he called on me. I can't remember the exact wording of the question, but I do remember the 3 main points that I wanted to hit. I mentioned that I read his book, and that I had a question about him stealing and selling music, and asked what it was like for him to bump elbows with and interview people whose work he stole to survive. His answer started out good. He thanked me for reading his book and asking a unique question that he really hadn't thought about before. And then it went wrong. I think he could see that I could see that he had no idea what to say. Maybe the right answer for him to give was, hey, that's crazy. I've never thought of that before. And that's before you could think about how any potential answer could get him sued. I mean, we weren't supposed to record inside the studio, but you never know if footage is gonna get out. He started spinning his wheels and buying time. This was supposed to be the easy part of recording the show, and I had made it difficult. So what did Trevor do? He swerved into a great story about meeting Beyonce at the Oscars. It's wonderful. Let me play you a clip of his answer right here.
You know, this was the weirdest moment of my night and maybe my life. I will see where I categorize it. I'm on the dance floor, everyone's having a good time, and then Beyonce starts walking in my direction. So I'm like, oh, I should move, right? Because it's Beyonce. Where she is going is not to me. So I'm like, I must move. It's Beyonce. So she like walks towards me. So I like turn to move out of the way. But it turns out she was coming to say hi. She says hi to everybody, like just like a nice hi. You think she'd be like sitting in a box, like waving? No. She's saying hi and she's really cool and she comes over to say hi. But now I'm like moving away from her And she's like trying to like come in and hug me and say hi. And I'm like moving. And then I realize I'm making Beyonce do this weird move. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Beyonce, I'm so sorry.
And he finished his answer by saying how crazy it was to personally meet the people he used to just look up to. And the second half of that would have been a wonderful answer if I wasn't such a big fan. Because that clip I showed you was not from when I asked a question. It was from a couple weeks prior. At the time, I laughed and smiled and said thank you because that's what you do, but I was disappointed. Think of like this meme. What he said was fine, but I wanted an answer for my question, and that's not what I got. The clip of our interaction never made it to The Daily Show's YouTube channel, and I understand why. Anyone who watched a lot of between-the-scenes content could tell you immediately that it wasn't an original answer. I guess it wasn't really what I was expecting because I had seen hundreds of interviews this guy had done, and he would always ask his guests questions like the one I had thrown to him. But when he was in the same position, I felt like he kind of fumbled. And that was that. The rest of the taping was fun, and I'm glad I went. And I was certainly glad that I asked my question first, because on the next round for questions, there's like 100 hands up. But I left the experience disappointed because I didn't just want to hear a polished, perfect answer. I didn't want a flawless retort. I wanted to know how he felt. Years later, I watched this video by Ludwig about meeting fans, and it caused me to really think back about my question to Trevor.
If someone comes up to me and I give them a bad impression, they will just always have that, and they will think I'm a bad person.
It made me really think about the pressure that Trevor was feeling in that moment. I bet he wanted to give me a better answer, but when you're as famous as he is, it's better to be bland than controversial. As I spend hours and hours editing my own statements to make them perfect before I show them to the world, I finally understand why he deflected the question. Towards the end of Trevor's run on The Daily Show, he told a story about meeting his own #1 bootlegger in South Africa, who had sold hundreds of thousands of copies of his work, and how awkward that interaction was. And I remember watching it and wondering if he had thought about my question again while he was in that moment. That all brings me to the one and only time I've ever been recognized in public. So I was traveling and I decided to go to the gym. You know, AirPods blasting the chapel, lifting 500 pounds, you know, like a light day for me. And this like super buff guy comes up to me and he goes, "Do you know Leo?" And I'm like, "No, because I am Leo." And so he hits me with the super bad, like you know that guy Jimmy? You totally look like his brother.
You guys know a guy named Jimmy? You totally look like his brother. You totally look like his brother, man.
Yes, he tells me I look like my own brother. And at this point, I'm panicking, so I just pretend I didn't hear him at first and just agree and say, "Yeah, I do look a lot like my twin brother." And he says, "Well, tell your brother that he should publish more videos." Ladies and gentlemen, I do not have a brother. It was my first time being recognized in public, and I fumbled harder than Mark Sanchez. So I just wanted to say, if that's you out there, I'm sorry for that interaction. And it was kind of the final piece that I needed to understand the answer that Trevor gave me. I wanted to get some kind of connection with him on like a human level. I didn't want a corporate answer. I wanted emotion. And years later, I realized I actually did accomplish my goal. It's just the emotion I stirred in him was panic. It kind of reminds me of another Ludwig quote from the same video.
You're always scared and you never know what you're doing. When you realize everyone's a dumbass who's scared, it doesn't feel bad when you're a dumbass who's scared. Just remember that.
And as someone who has now been on both sides of the fan-instigated panic, I want to apologize for ever judging Mr. Noah for his answer, because holy fuck, glass houses. If you enjoyed me telling a random story from my past, I think you will really like this video I made about why I stopped saying gay. The short summary is this meme. But I also took a detour to explain why conservatives are working so hard to bring slurs back.